Your Excellency, George Manawia, President of the Republic of Liberia, I hereby humbly request a moment of your time to break my silence to you and my fellow Liberians. This topic requires a moment of silence also in honor of those we've left behind, yet requiring full recognition and the honor that they truly deserve. I would like to throw a light on the life history and legacy of the knight, the Honorable Gray Wole Johnson, a pioneer in telecommunication in Liberia with the French Cable Company, his employer, trainer from high school, a recipient of the Grand Order of the Black Star, a knighthood conferred on him by General Charles de Gaulle at the end of World War II. A co-recipient is former French President Jacques Chirac, a veteran of World War II, serving U.S. military base war frontline efforts from Liberia. His parents were Honorable and Mrs. Tia Woode Johnson. The Honorable Tia Woode Johnson was a very influential elder who fought for the welfare of his people. He bridged the gap between those from abroad and the Aborigines when he gave his daughter in matrimony to the Tubman family, the brother of President William V.S. Tubman. His siblings were Police Commissioner of Curtisburg, Detachment, and Bento, the Honorable Samuel Byte Johnson, Mrs. Grace Tubman, and Mr. Woode Johnson, and the Honorable Elquia Johnson, Undersecretary of Treasury. His early school tutor was his auntie, Mrs. Mary Weddy Farr, wife of Honorable Nettie C. Farr of Spring Hill, Garaway. His history and life story of his wife. Mrs. Comfort Priscilla Wanning Johnson. Her parents were Eliza Beatrice Manon Jones from Grand Cape May County, a missionary, and the elder of many children. Her siblings were Honorable E.C.B. Jones, Secretary of Defense, Republic of Liberia, Honorable James A. Jones, Brigadier General, AFL. She was a devoted and faithful housewife and mother of 9 children. She sewed, she baked, cooked, and served 2 churches as a member of the altar guild in the Trinity Cathedral Church and St. Thomas Church on Camp Johnson Road. She also made bread to sell to help the family. Gray Johnson's schooling was at the St. Augustine Boarding School in Gardnersville. He was handpicked by the head staff of the French Cable Company to be trained after school every day as well as weekends. His uncle, Reverend Minneberg, was the priest and instructor. Gray Johnson's hobby was gardening, guitar, imports, sales, mentor to family and friends. The beginning of a history with the French Cable. Prior to World War I, the French Cable was manned exclusively by French personnel in the very beginning. Leading up to the war and during the World War I, French mobilization created new industrial needs and generated a workforce shortage. The crisis has severe consequences. Companies hired new types of workers, including women, young and vigorous people, and foreigners, and etc. Soldiers were being pulled off the battlefield to work the factories. The French cable company set out to identify a qualified student candidate, a candidate who would have a keen sense of its obligation to meet the full requirements of the job ahead. Working on GMT time, when the station in France signed on, he must sign on simultaneously. Must be available at all times when called upon to meet the demands of telecommunication. Worked on weekends, holidays, Sunday, prevented him from serving the Trinity Cathedral Church, where he served as the sexton, the one who rung the church bell and prepared the church for worship. His training began each day after high school classes. After graduation, he continued working full-time. He matured on the job and won the confidence of employers in Monrovia and the Home Office in France. He matured on the job, being most reliable, trustworthy, and his performance was so outstanding that he ran the radio station when all the French employees were on vacation. The head office recommended that he be given a managerial position, but was not given him. Undergoing less pay, the job was no elevation for him. After 20 years, he sent in his resignation and it was accepted. He returned to Maryland and took on employment with the Fireson Plantation Company and worked as a druggist to support his family he left behind in Monrovia. 5 years later, World War II hit North Africa and spreading. The government of the United States sought permission and erected a military base in Liberia. Wireless was the key telecommunication apparatus being used by all involved in the war. At that rate, signals were being jammed and compromised. The French cable was also secured, communication safe, and accurate enough to execute supply and demands for the smooth operation of the war. Seeing the need for the most effective use of the French cable wartime operation, the French government and the Liberian government sought out after the return of Honorable Gray Johnson by sending a delegation to Maryland. He bluntly refused. After days of negotiation for his return, he decided to return on one condition. The condition was that he be given his managerial job and the back pay. His demand was agreed upon in writing. He returned and took over the station. Bearing in mind his French experience as a young man manning the French cable station when there appeared a German submarine, since 4 o'clock at the event that followed, he had informed the French cable office in France and remained on the job. Later that day, he was accredited with sending an SOS signal, and the crew fled for their life. The president ordered all churches should ring their bells, urging everyone to pray. The SOF signals were picked up by a gunboat that drove the submarine away, fearing naval mines. Admiral Johnson worked the remaining days and hours of World War II effectively, and America's frontline effort from Liberia, which liberated France and Europe, as well as the liberation of the Jewish people. That the wartime president of France, General Charles de Gaulle, found it very necessary to confer one of France's highest awards on him, the Grand Order of the Black Star, a knighthood, an award recommended higher than the military award. Fearing the worst, he had said before returning to Monrovia and taking over the French cable that if he was not satisfied, his demands were not met, he would take the French cable to court, and they agreed. So, Honorable Gray Johnson began his legal defense by assembling some of the top defense lawyers he could find, such as the Honorable Clarence L. Simpson, the first vice president of William V. S. Tubman, Nettie C. Brownell, his cousin, and Billy Horace. Unfortunately, Clarence L. Simpson died before he got to court. At his funeral at the Trinity Cathedral Church, Gray Johnson dressed appropriately, wearing the medallion, the Grand Order of the Black Star, in full respect to the former Vice President, President Edwin Barclay, the president who preceded William V. S. Tubman, got concerned. His best friend, Nettie C. Brownell, and Billy Horace invited him to the home of Gray Johnson, where they were when the PRO people, the people who report orders, PRO means people reporting orders, told Tubman, and Gray Johnson's home was raided. At that raid, the former president, Edwin Barclay, fled the house for the riverside and ended up behind the Rock Spring Bishopbrook well, where he was caught for treason, just for assembling a meeting. To my understanding, Nettie C. Brownell and Billy Horace had already put in their bid, putting Gray Johnson in front as their man, because if you see from his obituary, of those who knew him, they all praised him for being a staunch, faithful friend and a devout Christian, a one who was fair to everybody, whether in business or people to people. He was decent and a faithful friend. So they put him up to be the chairman, to be the head of the party. They wanted him to run as president. So they formed their own political party peacefully, following the procedure. And that political party was called Liberian Independent Truic Party, rather than just the Truic Party of Liberia, which many felt they were disenfranchised. So that was one of the reasons. And Nettie C. Brownell and Billy Horace were thrown in jail. And I guess Nettie C. Brownell got out earlier, but Nettie C. Brownell refused to apologize because they did nothing wrong. But Gray Johnson was ostracized because he was a mentor to Tubman, a very good childhood friend, but he wouldn't take Gray Johnson's advice. They played soccer from childhood days. So he decided that he was going to keep those people in jail until they apologized. Billy Horace stayed in jail all the time, and let us see everybody was out. But Gray Johnson was protected by many in his family who served Tubman directly, was around Tubman. And they told him that Gray Johnson was not he meant well. He wanted to give the right advice because he's always been a mentor to Tubman and those who was around him. So that ended that sort for the political party. It got damaged right there. So he showed me in the medallion and stated that he did not even get the graduated that he was only told about. He was not given the ministerial job, nor back pay. He took out a lawsuit, and his lawyers were all thrown in jail. So if you saw the law report, it's as though he was never in court. The plaintiff never showed up. And so it went the way the Speaker of the House, who represented the French people, decided it should go. So in the very end, Gray Johnson never got justice, never got a fair trial. His lawyer was thrown in jail, and after that, the report that came out, made by the Speaker of the House, didn't depict any representation of Gray Johnson case, and it was just put in the record the way it was. It shouldn't have even gone to court. It was the honor that he would deserve wasn't given to him. Okay. So to elaborate more, Beatrice Williams, the cousin of my father and my mother, was handpicked, a married woman, to go study abroad, to come back and teach linguistic arts to his children in the executive mansion, which she did. But she came to the house all the time. He sent her to the house to tell my father that his head was hard. He wouldn't join him. And he told her to go right back and tell him his head was harder. I was used to torment my father. Being in the band, I had to sort a way to support myself. Playing on stage, we had a TV host. I wouldn't call her name, but she came to where we practiced all the time in the home of a very decent gentleman who was the director of Interpol, Pittman Swain. She came there all the time and sat with us and didn't ask anybody else to go on TV but me. All the other kids from better homes and well-connected parents, I didn't know why she wanted me to go on TV, but one day I just got mad and said, okay, I'll come on TV. And I went on TV with her, and she had two other gentlemen with her from the upper class. She spoke with them, and when she turned to me, she asked me one question: when last you went to church? And I got mad, but I kept on cool. I decided to give her what she wanted and said, I can't tell her the last day. And she shrugged her shoulders and never looked my way again. My father saw that on TV. And the very next morning, I heard the banging on my door. And he said, put on some clothes, let's go. Let's go. I didn't want to ask him, I just followed him. So we went to the Bank of Monrovia. And he told me, whatever money that was being sent here to my house, because the Speaker of the House decided what he felt like giving my father, because he said what my father sued for was too much for him. So he sent money to my father every month by the brother of my sister's husband, former ambassador Fred Sherman. And my father would forget why keeping the company there or talking. After a while, he ready to go and want to give my father the money. My father would drive him out of the house. Don't ever come here again with that money. So his brother, the Undersecretary of Treasury, E.C.B. Jones, Secretary of Defense, and James Jones, Brigadier General, they all told him that that money was put into the Bank of Monrovia. We went to the Bank of Monrovia and approached the manager who sat at the desk. But being that my father was ostracized, when he saw him, the manager just got up and got very out of control and mad. And my father was very calm, and I was shocked to see him behaving the way he did. And he told the old man, my father, to go to Richard Henry's for the bank account information. And that was the end of it, because he wouldn't go. We left, and I understood. He felt the pain. He told me he was going to take that money and send me to Nigeria for school. He felt disappointed. The second time I was used to taunt my father was, surprisingly, President William V.S. Tubman, second to the last inauguration, my band was hired to play for his inauguration at the Executive Pavilion. We went there and set up early enough and were told to be back at 7 o'clock for the beginning of the event. So we got back dressed 7 o'clock, and when we got to enter, they told us that the guests were all seated, that we should leave and go around the back where we would see the president and the vice president and speak to them, introduce ourselves, and tell them who our father's name was. I thought nothing of that. So I was ahead, in front. And then the band leader, we went in, and I spoke to the vice president. He shook my hand, he smiled, he knew me very well, and my father. Then I went to the president, William V.S. Tubman, and shook his hand and told him my name. And being that I know the situation between he and my father, I didn't want to waste much time with it. So, who your father? I said, Greg Johnson. He wasn't taking that. He said, huh? And before I could call his name in full, Greg Willard Gelati Johnson, Jimmy Barrow, who is the butler, yelled out, that stubborn rebel man. And when he said it, it was so funny that I began to laugh, and I remember the story that was told about how he came to that conclusion to tell my father he's a stubborn rebel man. And when he said that, being I was smiling and laughing, Tubman turned from him and looked at me. He was holding my hand in hesitation, and then he saw me smiling, and he too began to smile until we connected there, because he knew, he seen me, probably saw my father in me, and for the first time he had somebody from the family that close to my father could smile with him. So I thought nothing of it, and I went home. But that incident was one that really drew me closer to my father. To be told when I was going to play for the president that my father was a stubborn rebel man was very tricky for me. All I could do was laugh. But it brought to my attention that the incident that Jimmy Barrow could jump at was that in taking care of my father's situation, going to court and not getting anywhere, he talked about baffling. I read all his letter, death trap, economic strangulation, baffling, and all that. My father never got any result through the court. In fact, all his lawyers was in jail. So his sister, Grace Tubman, got into a family who told me in detail, And when they talk at that time, they whisper it. They didn't want my father to hear it, or like somebody is listening to go and tell Tubman, I'm sorry. And she invited him to go with her to go see the president at the mansion to look into his case and talk about his case. He hesitated. He didn't want to go. She encouraged him and talked to him. She was so concerned. He said, okay, let's go. They went to the mansion, and Tubman came out. They sat, and he began to talk. And I tell him about father. All your people work for me and they're close to me. And began to name everybody and said why he don't join. He sat there and listened to Tubman, but Tubman didn't give him a chance to talk. And I called Jimmy Barrow to give him some, bring in $20,000 to give to my father. And that's when the old man got mad. He said, I didn't come here to beg you for money. This is not your money, it's the people's money. You have no right to just give it to me. And Barrow was astonished. And those who talk, told me, my father was so mad, he was shaking. That's how his sister left the mansion because she was scared that he would, and that was the second time that I was being used to taunt my father. And Jimmy Barrow had to tell me about my father being a stubborn, rebel man. Okay, and then as those times are going on, my mother's brother, E.C.B. Jones, at a point was being sought for accusation that he and my father was planning to overthrow the government. If you want detail, you want to know anything about this, you can talk to one like former Ambassador George Wallace from Ellen Johnson government. He remembers that. And a lot of people remember this case here. But Tubman was convinced that Great Johnson wouldn't do anything like that. He was not that kind of person, and it was a complete lie. Those people who were sticking lied to him. But E.C.B. Jones, Jimmy Jones, they told Tubman, please, whatever you do, don't stop her from going around my sister, your sister, and her husband, because he meant nothing to harm him. And Elquia Johnson, his brother's Undersecretary of Treasury, frequented the house to convince his brother also. They all tried to tell me, he said no. The direction on which Tubman got this country is leading the country down the wrong path, and the people will rise up. The people will rise up. He always talked about doing things the civilized way. And so that was one of the trait that was being played to get my father in jail, in trouble, but that didn't work. So eventually, my father, Tubman died, and all his brothers preceded him, and my father later on had to go to Germany to take treatment for a condition that he had lived with all his life. And I was to accompany him. I went with him to Paris, to Germany. And he took this surgery and was not well enough. And the first outing we went, took him to the park, my brother and I, and my brother's wife. He insisted on going to France after his case, and nothing could change his mind. My brother had his staff, his own clinic, and it was not prearranged, so he asked me to take my father to France to see the French government and the French president. But I look at my father's condition, he was not well, he was weak, and I had so much respect for this man. He had some other conditions that wouldn't make him so conducive, and I didn't want him to take him like that something might happen to him, wasn't well. So I couldn't go. I told him I couldn't take him to France. I didn't feel it was well enough to take him to France. As a matter of fact, he decided to come back to Liberia. I decided to come back to Liberia too, and forget about Germany for a while, even though I went back later on. But I couldn't take him to Paris. He was that determined. However, he got a stroke and he was bedridden. But I was there with him in home. We had someone to come and take care of him in the evenings, and the time I played guitar with him and talked to him. And one fine day, he held my hand while I was playing the guitar with a strength that I never knew he had. Because he had a stroke, he couldn't do anything. And he began to tell me about his case and how serious it was. And I was kind of playing the guitar and not serious. He yelled at me and he pulled himself out to hold, balance myself, and he came up a little bit and told me what was going to happen to Liberia. There would be a civil war in the country. The people will rise up. And if they come to me, I should call his name. This is all the will he left for me, and I will be free. Call his name. And he warned me of my sisters. I have many sisters, take care of them. And I shouldn't play. I don't know what he meant by I shouldn't play, but he showed me the people will rise up. And he was so serious until he got my attention fully well, and then he began to lie down, help me lie him down. I didn't know he had passed. But he seemed that he was just sleeping until the next morning I found out that he was in a coma, according to what the medical profession said. But he never came to. And I waited for that day. I always thought what he said, I didn't know what to do with it because things seems to be all right. We have William Talbot in the mansion and everything seemed to be going fine. Until one day, Samuel came to power. Because like my father said, William Talbot was very good. He was all right, but he was chipped off the same old block by carrying one political party, not giving people a choice. That was what he said. And Samuel came to power. I didn't know what to do with that. He came right before my house to this Crown woman called Mami Wata. She had a shop right before my house. And the Crown people play all night long. You can hear the music. But he came there, and we all ran on the road. And I stood on the head of the stairs, and he got out of the car, and everybody who came, like, they were trying to shake his hand, and I was blown away from what my father told me. And I saw him look at his face, he smiled at me. I didn't know what to think. And then he went and talked to her, and he came back up to get in the car, and she told all of them, nobody should bother me. She said, nobody bother that boy. That boy is my son. Meaning that she know my father. They all knew my father's struggle. The native people from all walks of life. The higher ups. My father was friendly with some of the top people in Liberia. They remember him. And we welcome him. Like the late McKinley A. Deshee's son, Leonard Deshee, here in Greensboro with me. Before he died, he told me one day, your father and my father were good friends. And I see his expression change, and he got up to walk, and he said, I've heard that so many times from so many people. What was done to the woman was a decent man. And so that really, the kind of person he was. So I didn't know what to do with it until one day, during the new government, I was called to the Capitol building by Thomas G. Wesson. I was told on the job in Telecom Corporation as the chief electronic technician then that I should report to the Capitol building. The vice president would like to see me. 5 o'clock in the morning. I just had to obey. I went there and was accepted there until he came. And then we went in the office. It was the Speaker of the House office, the Speaker of the House of Representatives office, and I was shocked. I didn't want to be in that office at all. And just everything my father told me played back in my head, how when the Speaker saw him, he ducked when he was in his car, but was doing all these things. to him in court and his case and whatnot. But the vice president told me to wait for him. He was going to the mansion, and he told them to give me anything I wanted, and I shouldn't leave. I was there from 5 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. When he came, he wanted to appoint me as managing director for Telecom Corporation. And I had enough time to think, especially when the old man told me, don't play. I told the vice president that I felt that I needed to go to school and get more training, and I'll be ready to serve. And he told me straight then, but anyway, you are our man there in the Telecom Corporation. We know you. Anything will come into you. I said, yes, sir, Chief. And that's how I left. How I come to when my father told me about if they come to me, I should call his name. I never thought that would happen, but then came Jenkins Scott, the Minister of Justice, who had ulterior motive and framed me for something else that I didn't do. And the matter I had to take it, I got fired. There was a meeting, called my minister and my immediate chief at the Justice Minister and the ministry, and he had a meeting. And a letter came from that meeting that I was fired. I didn't know for what reason. I went to the minister of the Post and Telecommunication. He told me he didn't want to discuss it. Not today, not tomorrow, not the after tomorrow. So I said, wow. I went to Sandra Perry, Senate Chairman of Telecommunication, and she told me, well, that's the Justice Minister who did this. And so the only place we can go now to solve this is that we go to the President, Samuel Doe. And I said, okay, I'll go along with you. So we went the next morning to the mansion. In the office of the Assistant Minister for Presidential Affairs, Minister Gal Jones, we assembled there and began to talk, explain what happened to him. I mean, what happened while I was there. And while we were talking, Jenkins Scott came, the Minister of Justice, and because of what I was doing there, I was corrupt and I shouldn't have been, I shouldn't be there, and he went off on me. So I simply said, this is the same thing Tubman and Richard Henry did to my father, Grable and Jack T. Johnson, you don't want to do to me. He said, oh, you don't have to, this is not the place to come and discuss your father's business. So Sandra Perry said, the boy is right. He didn't do what you say he doing. It's a ulterior motive. He didn't do that. So the president called everybody in his office. His office was next door. And I was the only one sitting there in the office of the Minister for Presidential Affairs. And after a while, I got someone to come out and tell me, say, I should forget the whole thing and go back to work. That's how I went to work. My father told me that, to call his name. So, with all being said, there were times when I felt that I was being used just because of my father's situation. And Justice Minister Jenkins Scott told me straight, this is not the place to come and discuss your father's business. But it went through. Anyway, I got free. My father passed, and the wake was held at the Anderson Funeral Home because the church, also that he served so fervently, excommunicated him because he wouldn't go along with Tubman. He was ignored. Whatever he said, he was ignored. And he had friends within the hierarchy. In fact, he was the closest to Tubman, William B. S. Tubman. When Tubman became president the first person he told was my father. But how he told my father, I am the president now. Come join me, let's raise hell with these country people. And he told Tubman straight, if you tell me that, I will break your head. Because that's the talk he always used to say, even to me, to his friend, and he was serious about it. He was a unifier. His father was a unifier. He was trying to bring people together, and he was advising Totman. So it came to a point where my sisters, one of my sisters, Beatrice Mano Johnson, told me that some time ago she wanted a scholarship to go abroad, and she didn't have the money. So she was friendly with some of the Tubman family, and I told her, why don't you go see Willie? And she went and talked to him. He asked her, what's her name? And she called her name, her father's name. And next thing he told her, no, 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 no. She said, Barclay told me to say no. The president preceded him. He said, but this one, I will do it. And he told her, your father had a football team in Cape Palmas, and he never put me on that team. That's our team. He never wanted to put me on that team. To show how close they were. He was a mentor to Tubman. Tubman was born 1895, and my father was born 1896. But in structure, in height, my father was bigger, and he was always the one cautioning and advising. So that ended that episode there, that I knew they started their friendship from childhood playing football. In fact, Tubman was a football player, but I don't know how good. But this is why he named the team Barrow after his butler and the stadium after his wife. He supported Barrow. So football has always been in the Liberian presidency. As a matter of fact, as my family remembered very well all that they all endured. They all have their own story. My elder sister was so proud to say how her father sent her to school in Bethany in Cape May County. The two elder sisters, Neba Wolo and Mano Johnson, they both proud to say the father paid the school fee, but the rest of us, from Clarissa, Violet, they said the sisters at the St. Teresa Convent used to pay their high school tuition. And George, my brother, who's in Germany, the retired general surgeon, is one who I have in common with you, Mr. President. He was Liberia's first Olympian. He has a legacy, like his father. Liberia, first pioneer, the pioneer in telecommunication, the first Liberian to go into that field, was handpicked by the French. If you look into the book by Richard Watkins, he said, he noted that the colonial powers during those days told that the Africans were not smart enough to maintain their own radio station, so they ran their own radio station. They ran the radio station around Liberia and around the colonies. But from the event of World War I, when the German submarine came to bomb Liberia, it brought about that awareness that Liberians needed to have their own communication radio station to control the interior and the borders and govern themselves. So the book by Richard Watkins is very important for Liberia telecommunication and the history of telecommunication in Liberia. I became a member of the interim government, founded in Sierra Leone and returned to Liberia with the interim government. And it was a sight. But everything my father said was there before me. One of my main jobs I was tasked with was with telecommunications, technical, pulling the staff together, the equipment, telecommunication equipment. And I was asked to accompany the general, Nigerian general, to the barracks. General Dogon Yarrow, who we went there after an incident, and we took care of situation there. And the second time, I was asked to go to the Waytown Earth Station outside Monrovia, accompanied by General Kwano in the war tank, or armor carrier. I should have been in the armor carrier with him, but I wanted to be with the drivers and my technicians. And an incident happened on the road that the driver didn't listen to the security at the checkpoint. One of the soldiers, the armed forces, not the echo mark, and he went for his gun, and we dropped on the floor. General Kwanu saw that and turned around very fast and came and put that situation under control. For Liberia, we do everything possible to make sure that Liberia runs well. So I made my contribution there. And when I returned to Sierra Leone, after going to the mansion without electricity with another technician, and no one would accompany us. The soldiers won't go up there with us, but we went and we got radios to install at the Duco where we used for the mansion, and we took the other one to Sierra Leone and installed it in Cape Sarah Hotel, where I asked for leave of absence and came to America to check on my family. And got stuck. My wife was here with 5 kids alone, and she needed my help. Okay, so while here, I kept my eyes on Liberia, provided a fax machine for the Liberia Embassy in Maryland, and went there and installed it, went there, and I attended a meeting that had the French cable on the docket, a meeting where we had studied. In fact, the theme of the meeting was, the conference was USA Africa Telecommunication Broadcasting 1994 in Crystal City, Washington, D.C. And I joined the Minister of Post and Telecommunication and the Deputy Minister for Technical Affairs from Liberia Telecommunication Corporation, and we represented our country well, Liberia, and I spoke on behalf of the French cable company indirectly, because the other beta wanted to do the same, like we were trying to get away from colonial type telecommunication. We have put all these plans in place to make sure that Liberians would be able to have telecommunication, Africans in general, without the exorbitant cost because of our economic situation in Africa. And the system you see working today in Africa, that we brought telecommunication to the streets, the people in the streets, the street vendors as well. That was all in the plan. So today, if we say telecommunication in Africa, we need to know the most important event that happened with this French cable that brings us telecommunication today, that had worldwide implication, happened in Liberia twice, World War I and World War II. And today we have a pioneer who served during that time very effectively and was honored and not being recognized in Liberia. None of the kids in the street know about him. And we allowing him to be left under the rug because of political reasons between the president and the administration and him. He should be made an honorary French citizen because his own country didn't look at him. Because he was not from a set that was known, the ruling class. As it was said in the history, that Liberia didn't have any personnel on the battlefield during World War II. They mentioned that the only military that was on the ground, AFL, was to protect the handful of American Liberians or those who were in charge. So they didn't participate in the war. They were not equipped. But they even forgot to mention Great Johnson was under control. He was brought back. He was on the front line of U.S. war effort from Liberia. Not everyone goes to war holds a gun. You have experts, telecommunication experts out there, so many different fields. You have medic, paramedic. So he was on the controls, disseminating information, supply and demand, and he worked tirelessly and was not given his award or his recognition. He was left after the war, just got this medallion of this high honor, and the French took off and left him with the Liberians, and they did just what they wanted to do to him. And so I am hereby requesting, Mr. President, of you to please take the front. There's so much to be said, but I can't say everything right here. It's been with me for many years, and I've told my sisters and my family I will get this out to the Liberian public and to the world. So, Mr. President, I request that you please get involved in this matter with the President of France. And like I told my auntie who told me, Beatrice William, when I told her what I was going to do, I was going to write a letter to the United Nations, The Hague, International Court of Justice, the French President, and the Liberian President, and get the American government involved to see that this man get the honor he truly deserved. On another note, because of the Civil War and the strife, a sister of mine who had fled Liberia returned later on. Because for survival, she turned the old man place into a daycare to generate money to support herself, because there was nothing to do. And it was so prosperous in doing that that even the president, Charles Taylor, and the top government officials sent the children there to the Great Johnson house for daycare. And I warned her that she shouldn't do that, because they will turn with anything happening and damage that place. But she went ahead anyway, because things was tough. She needed to do that. And as a result, when she left, when there was an uprising and things got tough, she left. A gentleman in the neighborhood took touch and began to put fire on the old man's house. And the people around there told him not to do that. He said the man was a Congo man. And they told him he's not a Congo man. He's a countryman. He's a raw rural man. And he said no, because he had seen the activities there. So he went after, and he burned the place down, the house down. And that property has a big historic value with the French Gable, because my father some time ago dug an outside toilet. He had to go deep in the ground. It went so deep that it hit the water vein that runs down to that creek, that Rock Spring Bishopbrook. And in order to save the earth that he took out, he turned a lot of cables, broken cables that were no use, the French cable, and he stuffed them in that hole and covered it with dirt. I can show you the spot there right now, Mr. President. It's on that property. So, with whatever money was put in the Bank of Monrovia, and that wasn't given to the old man, I'm appealing to you to join me, that I'm proposing to my family to rebuild the homestead and put a library on the property. A library in honor of Great Johnson. Because history not told is bound to be repeated. Finally, I would like to throw a light on the passing of the old man. When he passed, people came around me on the bypass, standing on the road. A lot of people came all the time and showing their grievances. And this particular day I was standing there, greeting people and talking to people, shaking my hands. I saw this old man coming down the road, and everybody who left me was shaking his hand and almost bowing to him. And he just kept his eyes on me and came straight on to me and grabbed my shoulder with tears in the eyes. And he told me to be very proud of my father. He told me to be very proud. He said, he's a man of impeccable integrity and principles. And he was shaking, and he was so serious, I even felt like comforting him. But I didn't know him, and I accepted it. I told him thank you and whatnot. He said what he had to do and walk off. And then people who came nearby asked me, you know who's that? I said, no. They said, that's Albert Port. Albert Port. And told me about him. I said, no wonder. They're great people. So in that library, I'm proposing there would be records on the French cable. The medallion was given to him, was stolen in the war. I will need that medallion back from the French government. And whatever money I was put in the bank, we'll go after this case. I'm appealing to people out there who can help me. The United Nations, The Hague, the French government, and the Liberian government. He fought for the liberation of Jewish people. Erecting that library is the greatest thing we can do to honor this man because he never got justice. And in our library, we have people at Aberport. Like this book written by S. Richard Watkins on telecommunication in Liberia. And his son, George New Johnson, is someone I have in common with you because he became a Liberian first Olympian. He has all his medals. He's thinking about giving to his grandchildren, his children, and I said, no, it's better to be somewhere where they can see it and your Liberian people can see it. So those medals he won from Australia, from Greece, running even while he was studying Germany, the Liberian government was asking, and nothing is being said about him. Nobody know about him. The last time I stood by him at my elder brother, Dr. A. Newman Jones, the birthday we had in Chicago, he stood there and they were talking about him. There was an Olympic going on, and he was talking about how our father was treated. But he always longed to come back home and give his contribution and work as a doctor. When he got ready to come home to serve, the war was on in Liberia and we all had left. And he regretted that because this was his ambition to come back and serve his country. I recall when I first picked him up from the airport when he came some time ago, when he came to visit Liberia, pick him up from the airport, took him to my big brother's house, and the next morning went to play soccer at the free port from Monrovia soccer field, and someone gave me elbow in my neck, and I ruptured something in my neck, and I didn't know. I kept on rubbing it. But the next day I went home, I could hardly get out of bed. By Monday morning, I had people carry me to even get in my car, to get out of the car. Lunchtime, he was to meet to the house. He came to the house lunchtime, and he saw how I was struggling and people were carrying me up. He had been in the neighborhood treating all the old folks who knew him. He knew, just checking on getting medication and whatnot, and went to meet to the house prayer. When he saw me coming, he got so concerned, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. My whole nervous system was shutting down me. And we went, they took me up in the living room, and he came there, and he opened his bag, and he took some cocktail stuff up, and then gave me a shot right in my neck. Within a few minutes, I began to sweat. And I lift my hand up, it was free. I stood up, and the people saw me going back to work. 30 minutes later, they wonder what happened. Those are some of the good things Liberia have lost because of the Civil War. He has a legacy. His father has a legacy. We need to put people in telecommunication who have done some great contribution to that country in the field that The colonial powers felt that Africans were not ready to compete. We have to leave a legacy somewhere where young kids coming up in telecommunication can go to and read and get lectured to. A peaceful place where those who want to make a change would think about positive way of making a change for the betterment of our people rather than destruction and war. Like my father always said, let's do things the civilized way. And that's how I think it should be. Now, the burning of the homestead, this gentleman who burned the house, he's forgiving because they didn't know. He's driven for the fact that he's saying the man was a Congo man. But Mr. President, I remember one of your officials was going that same way and you alerted him and told him not to do that. We are one people. This thing about Congo and country is something that is embedded in those who want to do wrong. Like what we have in America now, racism. When you go back to Liberia after living in America for a long time, you have the detox. You have to get back with your people and embrace them like you're one, not that you're Lord because you came from somewhere else and you have the connection. America is trying to get away from that today. So we should do better with that, Mr. President. I stand behind you fully and I support you in all your efforts. And I have worked for every American, for every Liberian president since I've been out here. I made contribution to the Charles Taylor government. I made contribution to the Ellen Johnson government. And we'll always be there. I was there for Tubman growing up, going to school, and Toba government. I performed for him. We played for him, and he came on stage and hugged all of us. We're all one people. So I urge Liberian people to stop just ostracizing people because you're a footballer, so you can't do nothing else. That is wrong. Because you're a musician, you can't do nothing else. That is wrong. Because the highlight of my stay here in America was always to think about what my father told me, that I could do something. So seeing that war that was going on in Liberia, it had gone so far, being a member of the interim government did my contribution. And now I came to America and saw the troops, the warriors, going into Monrovia, crossing that bridge over the Providence Island, the original island, the free people from America landed on. I had that dream, and I was so happy. And I told my sisters about it, but I was looking from Monrovia side across the bridge. So I said, this is something serious, I have to do something about it. And while sitting down, I heard a voice told me, said, but your people are gone, you're here, what are you gonna do? They're all gone. So that's when I got up and went to the Greensboro News and Records, the official newspaper in Greensboro, and gave a story. Before going, I called my sister-in-law, and Dr. Hannah Biedu Jones, she was former ambassador to the United Nations. And I told her I was going forward. What are we doing for Liberia? She said she already written a letter to Kofi Annan and President George W. Bush, and had no response. I said, send me the letter, I'm going to take it. When I took the letter to the newspaper, they told me they don't know whether these two honorable gentlemen had seen the letter, but I should give a story, and they would mention it, and I gave a story. I ended up on the front page of the Greensboro News and Records, an official American newspaper with George Bush and Tony Blair of Great Britain. That piece of document, I still have it. It's part of the exhibition for that library we wish to install to commemorate those people who struggled for Liberia peacefully, who made great contributions. In Richard Walking books, you mentioned about the old man. And if you go to chapter 6, he talked about his contribution, and he talked about pioneer without reward. We only talk about ministers and presidents and so forth. So athletes and other people in another area, musicians means nothing to people on the ground, but it means a whole lot, because athletes and musicians, they are people who work and feed their families. And Mr. President, I want to congratulate you and tell you thank you, because I remember clearly how you got to Telecommunication Corporation. It's an incident that happened that I don't want to mention here, but I just couldn't play any more football. And so I was out of the game completely. I couldn't touch the football. I was in the moon for situation. And so I left the team with Joseph Noah, the manager, the team manager. And so he came. I was one of the players. I will mention the incident to you personally, and you will understand. I don't think I should mention here, take away. But Joseph Noah told me one day, Martin, we don't have any good players. I want to bring George Weah in. And I said right away, but if you bring the man in, we got to keep the man. We got to find something for him to do. So if you have anything, if you have problem, let me know. We can give him some training. We got commercial area. We got so many things, overseas operation, whatnot. And before long, George Weah, President George Weah, you were employed by Telecom Corporation. And we were glad to have you. Later on, after you went international, I have friends come to me to the office, and we try to speak to you in French all the time. And on one occasion, I spoke to you. I said, not before February, call you those days. Opon, my man, the only good news coming out of Liberia today, we have a Liberia, is the one you're making in France. And I told you, fight for the people. You are carrying a Liberian flag. Fight for your people. I didn't know what I was saying. Today you're president. You find all kinds of ways to talk to your people. If you sing to your people, anybody disqualify you, don't listen to them. Sing to them. I applaud Prince Johnson for singing to us, to the public, saying that he didn't want to be president. He just wanted peace for the country. And my first speech I made with the interim government of Liberia, I told the interim government president that we must recognize Prince Johnson. These are our heroes. These are our Robin Hoods. Well, lastly, Mr. President, there's much to be said. Much of my family, or myself, Martin Johnson, former Chief Electronic Technician, Liberia Telecommunication Corporation, and I went up to the Ministry of Post and Telecommunication as Director for Radio Regulatory and License. I worked closely with the International Telecommunication Union, Geneva, and the FCC of the United States of America. And then as Acting Assistant Minister for Telecommunication and international organizations. And then I was in charge of the affair of the Liberia Telecommunication team. And I'm pleased to let you know that after he left us, I got over my situation and I came on the field, took a position, and we played a final game, the Ministerial League, against LBS, Liberia Broadcasting Corporation, where the first goal was from a pass from Calvin Sigbe to me. And I netted the ball. We won the tournament. And the soccer playing president of Samuel K. Doe invited us to the mansion to play Executive Lions. And we went there and we were defeated on executive grounds. I admire that. I appreciate all that. So, Mr. President, I will close on this note. There's so much to be said I cannot say on this set. And I'm so emotional that I cannot be at peace and calm, because this is my life. My whole life I woke up and saw my father fighting for justice for us. And that's why I went to play guitar. My first passion was football. Chacha Morgan carried me to Barrow. But Josiah Johnson, the coach, told me that he sees me playing band on the stage. I should make up my mind which one I want to do. I kept on going to practice until one day when he put all the gestures on the ground and said, you will feel you can take a position, take your jersey. I went for the number 9 jersey, and the old player came and took it from me. I said, I'm going to music. That was it. But this is all part of the art that we all have. This is just the beginning, Mr. President, because, like I said, to help you, I'm appealing to you to investigate whatever money was put in the Bank of Monrovia and talk to your counterpart, the President of France. The family need that money to rebuild the family homestead and give honor to our father, because everything he said came to pass. We seen it, we lived it, and he never got justice. We suffered it. Mr. President, please help. I ask God blessing upon you, Mr. President, and the Liberian people. Long live Liberia. Thank you very much.